What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astrodfs bringing you a brand new video. Today's video going over Week 3's first look on DraftKings for the main slate. Before we get into it, a thing I do every week is recap the line I had for last week's main slate in the double up. So we get to this, and this is what I ran with. Obviously, did the chalk plays in Jordan Mason, Cooper Kupp. I think those are, you just had to at that point. Jordan Mason, paid off definitely for his price point. Cooper Kupp went down, but with 86% ownership, it's not like it hurt me. Ended up going Kobe Parkinson just because that's what the price I had left in my my price. So went with him. 57% owned, only 2 points. That one still didn't hurt me. But going Daniel Jones right in the main lineup, obviously with how cheap he was, it allowed me to pay at other prices for players. Yeah, he got 18 fantasy points. Was pretty close to a couple other plays, but still, 2% owned, got 18 fantasy points. Definitely paid off in that one. Went Zach Charbonnet at his, got 17 points. Sort of paid off, not entirely though. 10% Amon-Ra getting 25 points. That one helped. 29% Chris Godwin getting 27 points was amazing. And then the just ultimate payoff was Malik Neighbors stack with Daniel Jones getting 31 points. So my wide receivers really paid off. Getting the chalk play and Jordan Mason helped. And then everyone, Zach Charbonnet and Daniel Jones, who were low owned, did what they needed to do to help me, right? And then the chalk plays in Parkinson and Kupp didn't pay off point wise, but because they were so high owned, it really didn't hurt me. I finished 186 out of the 2,000 paid positions in the massive double up. This is the one I always recommend. Finished 186. So that's how week 2 went. Let's go to week 3 though. That's why you guys are here. So Lamar Jackson taking on Dallas, the most expensive quarterback. Dallas's defense just got destroyed by New Orleans. This one is very tough to judge. It is a split kind of choice here of who's going to take this one. Dallas's defense looked terrible against New Orleans. Their offense looked pretty bad, but Dallas is usually pretty bad playing from behind. Lamar and Baltimore fell to the Raiders, so both upsets there in that matchup. Really kind of skeptical of it. Jalen Hurts against New Orleans. You just saw what New Orleans did to Dallas. Philly's defense has not looked good. They just fell to Atlanta. If A.J. Brown is in this game, which it might not happen, I'm leaning towards New Orleans. I still think Philly's able to do stuff, but the way New Orleans plays defense lately, it might be time to hop on the New Orleans Saints train. So that one's there. C.J. Stroud against Minnesota 7,100. This one's really interesting to me. Minnesota's held the 49ers. They week 1 destroyed the Giants. Now you're facing Houston, who Houston got pretty slowed down by the Bears. I wouldn't put Minnesota's defense up there with the Bears, but Minnesota was able to stop the 49ers. That's something to consider. But in this matchup where you have Diggs, Dell, Collins, possibly Mixon, if not, it looks like Cam Akers is going to go there. 71 CJ Stroud might be really good. Obviously, Kyler Murray in his matchup against Detroit is one to definitely watch out for. Kyler Murray's price has gone up, right? Week 1, we got 6,400. Week 2, 66. Now we're at 69 for Kyler. And the payoff last week was great. If you played Kyler, he looked amazing. Like 2 touchdowns to Marvin Harrison in the first quarter. Stat line was crazy. They just, they took a big lead. They didn't need to pass that much anymore. They relied upon their run game. That's what they did. But Kyler, 59 rushing yards, so adds 5 points there, 3 touchdowns, 17 for 21 with an 81% completion percentage. If it would have been a close game, Kyler would have hit the 300-yard passing bonus as well. That would have been a huge boost. Detroit, it was a close game. I think the game Detroit-Tampa could have gone any way. Unfortunately for me, it wasn't as high scoring as I would have liked. Amon-Ra kind of banged up, but I still think Kyler Murray, as of right now, is probably the quarterback I'd pay up for in cash, just looking at it. Anthony Richardson against Chicago's defense, I'm just not interested in that. Dak against Baltimore's defense, kind of not interested there. Jared Goff, yet again, I'm interested in at 6,500. The thing is, Jared Goff has been 6,400 week 1, week 2. is disappointed fantasy-wise, right? Even, I mean, they escaped against the Rams week 1. They ran the ball a lot. Last week against Tampa, where I thought Detroit had a huge advantage in the passing game, they couldn't do much. Laporta has not been involved in the passing game at all, really, this season. So hopefully it happens this week. But, I mean, Jared Goff does have a really good matchup against Arizona. Do you want to pay for Jared Goff and what he's been able to do, or do you pay up for Kyler Murray? Baker Mayfield 6,300 is the next one. Tua, obviously, I think we all know Tua is not going to play in that game. Baker Mayfield 6,300 against Denver. This one's a good matchup for Baker. Baker's having a really good season so far, especially for DFS purpose. 29 week 1, 19 week 2, goes from 56 to 63. So Baker's kind of getting up there in price to where he's not as much of a value anymore, but it's still a really good matchup for him. Brock Purdy, 6K against the Rams, possibly without Debo and CMC. Well, we know without CMC, but Debo, it looks like he'll be out as well. So you're looking at Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, being the two guys, George Kittle being relied upon, Mason still doing a really good job. So it's not like San Fran's got no one there. And then you have to factor on the Rams side for Matt Stafford down here at 5,700. He's not going to have Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. You're relying upon Tutu Atwell, Robinson, Johnson, those guys to beat this San Fran defense, which is very tough. Now, the Rams have played really good against San Fran. They have. That's something to consider. But Derek Carr is now becoming a name to where do you play Derek Carr, right? 5,800, 2 weeks, 21 and 22 points at 5,300. Now goes up 500 against a Philly team who, I mean, that last drive against Atlanta just moved down the field easy. I think Atlanta struggled the entire game, but, I mean, when Kirk Cousins was, I guess, confident, he looked really good against that Philly secondary. So Derek Carr is definitely a name worth mentioning. It has to be worth mentioning with how good New Orleans has played these first 2 weeks. So I think it's a good matchup for New Orleans. Out of their, week 1 was a good matchup. Week 2 I thought was terrible, but they still destroyed Dallas. So now facing another opponent in that division, Derek Carr is worth mentioning. Caleb Williams is somehow worth mentioning, right? My quarterback has been underperforming. Offensive line was shaky, but he's still missing his throws, which is concerning, right? Has not thrown a touchdown yet in his first 2 games. I mean, the good thing is 37 passing attempts out of him, I guess. But in this matchup where you face a Colts secondary that Malik Willis just I had a good game against, you have to think that maybe Caleb Williams can too. This is the game where he potentially can. The rushing upside, he does, contain rushing upside. Colts have some pieces on their defensive line, but through 2 weeks, 10 rushing attempts for 59 yards. So it's something to consider. It's not the greatest thing with how he's performed right now, but it's definitely worth mentioning. Deshaun Watson, 5,500 against the Giants is definitely worth mentioning here. Now, Deshaun Watson underperformed so far this season as someone that's getting paid the amount of money and the investment Cleveland put into a quarterback. He's definitely underperforming, but against the Giants secondary, it's 100% worth mentioning. After that, you get Sam Darnold against Houston. I'm not really looking at that with the injury statuses of Minnesota pass catchers. You would have to have Addison and both Jefferson in this matchup for Darnold to be playable. Justin Fields, a rough matchup against the Chargers. Minshew is a good name worth mentioning, 5,300 against Carolina. Carolina's defense is just terrible, so definitely worth mentioning there. I don't want to say Will Levis, but Will Levis at 5,200 against Green Bay. They're favorites. It's worth mentioning. Other than that, there's not really any names. So we go down to Skylar Thompson, 5,100 against Seattle. I just don't want to take that shot yet. So I'm not going to go there. So we're going to move on to running backs. We already know CMC's out. Saquon Barkley against New Orleans, 7,700. That's a tough one. They've played running backs pretty good so far. Alvin Kamara against Philly, though, I mean, I know he just had 4 touchdowns and was amazing, has been amazing in this offense that we all hoped he would be. You just didn't know if you wanted to get burnt by him again. He's got 69 fantasy points in 2 games, right? 34.5 per game, going against a Philly team who week 1, Josh Jacobs was able to find success against them. Week 2, Bijan and Tyler Algier were able to have success against them. Now we have Alvin Kamara at 7,500. Definitely worth targeting. Jonathan Taylor against the Bears, another one worth mentioning, right? I like Jonathan Taylor all week. I think Jonathan Taylor 18.5 isn't the best, especially if you're paying 7,700 for. But he wasn't using the fourth quarter at all. Only 12 rushing attempts for 103 yards. So the volume he got was good, right? All right, like what he made out of his volume was good. He just did not get what I thought they would use him in for his price point. But against the Bears' run defense, I think it's a good matchup there. Kyren Williams against the 49ers. This one might be worth taking. We saw Kyren Williams be the work bell for that team before. We have a matchup where he could be the work bell again. So at 7,100, I'm definitely looking at him. Devon Achane, this one again, Raheem Mostert questionable, Jeff Wilson questionable. You're watching the injury status. Seattle's defense against the run average, but with the amount of work Achane's probably going to see in this matchup, if both Mostert and Wilson or at least one of them is out, Achane should get a lot of work, and that's a good matchup for him, right? I think this game is probably going to be close. Jahmyr Gibbs against Arizona, 6,800. This one's not bad. I like that price point against Arizona. He is going up, but the usage he should get in this game should make up for it. Josh Jacobs against the Titans. This one's questionable. Breece Hall had I'd say a good game against the Titans, but again against the Bears weren't able to do much, but they haven't done much in the run game yet. So take that with how you will. But Josh Jacobs has been pretty much the guy they've relied upon so far this season. 48 rushing attempts in 2 games for Josh Jacobs. Now, the fantasy points aren't there as you would hope they are, but he doesn't have a rushing touchdown this season yet, so that's also something to consider against a Tennessee defense that still has a very, very good run-stopping defensive line. James Conner, 6,600 against Detroit. Detroit has tried to play against the running back really good, but James Conner is yet again a guy that Arizona is going to play their offense through. 37 rushing attempts in 2 games. But the touchdown upside, if they get down there, is always high for James Conner. So that's worth mentioning. Derrick Henry against Dallas, 6,500. I mean, yeah, Alvin Kamara just had the great game there, but Jerome Ford really didn't week 1. Like Dallas's defense, especially their defensive line against Baltimore's offensive line. Again, that's kind of why I liked Vegas. Kind of worried me off of Derrick Henry, but last week 16.6 points and gets you a touchdown. So Derrick Henry's touchdown upside is always going to be there as well. J.K. Dobbins has got a rough matchup against Pittsburgh finally. He's looked so good this season. I thought Gus Edwards would be, they'd kind of flip and Gus Edwards would have a good game, but no, it was J.K. Dobbins. Ken Walker is definitely worth watching the injury status of. If he is out, Zach Charbonnet at 6K only goes up 200, is worth targeting again. So because of the game, Jordan Mason was not price adjusted, so it was a free play at 6,200. I still think it's a great play this week. I don't think his price is high enough for the consistency and the work he's gotten. 2 games, 48 carries, hits a 100-yard bonus in both games, touchdown in both games. So Jordan Mason definitely worth looking at again, just being a PC plug-in and find other pieces, other spots. So Tony Pollard, this one you're watching if Tajay Spears is out. If Tajay Spears is out, I really like Tony Pollard in this matchup against Green Bay. I just showed you Jonathan Taylor. For the small volume he got, he made a lot out of it. Tony Pollard is going to get volume, right? 16 carries week 1, 17 carries week 2. It is getting you, 15, 18 points. So for his price point, that's a good one there. Jerome Ford against the Giants, 5,800. This one is something you definitely have to look at, right? Giants defensive line I mentioned are good. I think they have a really good defensive line. But Jerome Ford. I mean, 7 for 64 against Jacksonville was concerning, but week 1 against Dallas was able to get you 18 fantasy points there, being used in the receiving game. So against this Giants team, I think Cleveland's going to try to get the ground game going in this one. Raheem Mostert, I mentioned, worth watching the injury status this week. And you're watching that for Devon Achane. Even Mostert, if he's in, is worth watching there. Devin Singletary, no. DeAndre Swift, 5,600 against Indy. I like it. I just wish DeAndre Swift would be able to run the ball, right? The Bears' interior offensive line has been very bad so far to start the season. Hopefully they can get it going, but in this one against DeForest Buckner, I'm hoping they can, but DeForest Buckner is a beast, so that one, first price point, yeah, but he hasn't done much so far because of how bad the Bears' interior offensive line has been. Zamir White at 5,500, yes. Him and Alexander Mattison, 5,500. Both those guys are worth getting in your lineups this week, going against one of the worst run defenses in the league. You saw what J.K. Dobbins was able to do, so both those guys are worth mentioning. Not really looking at Javonte against Tampa Bay. Jahmyr Gibbs able to have a good game, but I mean, Javonte just 19 carries in 2 games for him, right? Gets 5 receptions, but 19 carries for Javonte Williams is not good. Denver's team is bad. I mentioned it. They're a bottom 5 team for me. So it's hard to get behind someone like Javonte against a Tampa Bay defense that still has Vita Vea, a really, really good run disruptor there. So I kind of just want to go other places for that. Chuba Hubbard, 5,200 against Vegas is worth mentioning. But one guy I'm really looking at is Bucky Irving, 5,100 against Denver. Denver, a bad defense. And we're looking at Rachaad White, right, who through 2 weeks has not looked good. Came up questionable, saw that. But 2 weeks, he's got 25 rushing attempts for 49 yards. That's not very good. Like, if he doesn't have all this receiving work, if you take away the 13 points through week 1 in the receiving game, he does not have a good week. So Bucky Irving, if Rachaad White is out, Bucky Irving, in my opinion, is a free square at running back, just because he's so cheap. Good matchup against Denver, so that's something to watch out for there. I mentioned Tyjae Spears. You're watching the injury news there. Other than that, Cam Akers at 4,700 got, started to get all that work once Joe Mixon kind of got banged up, Dameon Pierce banged up. So Cam Akers at 4,700 is another guy worth mentioning to watch the injury status of that team. Then we go to wide receivers. And man, there are a lot of injuries at the pay-up prices for wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb against Baltimore is a good one. He had that big catch against New Orleans, and that was pretty much it, right? 65-yard touchdown. Other than that, pretty much stopped. So I thought it was a good matchup for CD. Obviously, if you paid up for him, it didn't pay off at 8,800. But, I mean, that Dallas team looked bad. Justin Jefferson banged up in that matchup against San Francisco. You have to watch out for Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson this week. It might be a really bad game for Minnesota if both those guys are out, or one or the other is out. It could be really bad for them. Tyreek Hill against Seattle, it's a tough matchup without Tua in at 8,400. Amon-Ra, watch your injury news. If Amon-Ra is good to go, 8,200. Really good matchup for him in this one. I like that. Cooper Kupp, I imagine he's out. I don't think it's worth questioning. He's out. A.J. Brown, this one, I imagine A.J. Brown is out at his price point too. Devontae Adams, 7,600. I mentioned Devontae Adams is kind of a good sneaky play. 9 for 110 and a touchdown gets you 29 DraftKings points. Definitely paid off if you got him. Marvin Harrison, yeah, I mentioned how tough of a schedule Marvin Harrison has versus just matchups. Week 2 against the Rams, good matchup for him. Definitely pays off 32 points. In this week goes against a Detroit team to where you just saw the likes of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. If you can combine them, both had a really good week. Marvin Harrison at 7,400 is definitely worth targeting. Nico Collins, 7,300. Yeah, through 2 weeks, Nico Collins hits a 100-yard bonus. Only one touchdown so far, but averaging 25 DK points. So Nico Collins is definitely worth mentioning in this one. Debo likely out at 7,100. Puka we already know is out. So then you get someone like Devontae Smith, who you're hoping Marshawn Lattimore is out. I mean, last night, 7 for 66 and a touchdown. Wasn't as good as we hoped for. But, I mean, Jalen Hurts, I don't know what the play calling was, but it seemed like Jalen Hurts had so much time to throw the ball, and they could not just get any guys with good route combinations for somebody to get open. But if AJ Brown is out, Devontae Smith 6,900 is definitely worth mentioning. Zay Flowers against Dallas is kind of a rough one. I don't know if I want to target that. He had a really good week last week, 22 DraftKings points, almost hits the 100-yard bonus, but 21 targets in 2 games. Definitely good for someone like Zay Flowers. DJ Moore against Indy, yes, I like DJ Moore in this one. Obviously, you're paying up for DJ Moore at 6,700, which is odd, right? I get it's a good matchup against Indy, but he's been 6,500 this season. He's gotten 10 points and 11 points. He should be down. He should definitely be 6,300. And I get it's a good matchup, but he has not produced. There's no reason someone that doesn't produce goes up in price rather than down. Makes no sense. Stephon Diggs against Minnesota, yes, again. Godwin against Denver. Yeah, like, it's a good matchup. I don't think you have to go there again this week. Obviously, last week, I showed you had a really, really good week. Paid off for his salary. It's 6K. I don't think you need to go there, though. League Neighbors had an amazing week. Goes up in price. Finally, they had him at 5,900 2 weeks in a row. Obviously, week 1, though, he really, 11 fantasy points, but that's not going to get you up. But 31 points will definitely get you up. This one against Cleveland is very tough. I don't know if I want to go there this week. Olave at 6,300, though. This one is definitely worth mentioning. Now, see how this makes sense. He has a bad week 1, goes down in price. Underperforms week 2 because it was the Alvin Kamara show. Goes down in price again. That makes sense at 6,300 against Philly. I like Chris Olave in this matchup. Brandon Ayuk at 6,200, though. This one kind of stands out to me. He is too cheap. Like 6,300 week 1, right? They did the thing where he goes up because it's Minnesota, 6,500. Now he's 6,200. If Debo's out, I'm targeting, I might just throw San Fran in everywhere. Like, that's how good it can be. Brock Purdy, Ayuk, Mason. 6,200 is cheap for Brandon Ayuk. Keenan Allen, watch the injury status there. If he's out again, you're looking at DJ Moore, Roma Dunze in those prices. Michael Pittman against Chicago is kind of risky. I don't know if I'd go Pittman. It seems like Mitchell is a good target. He's just a deep threat, so I don't know if I'm really targeting any Indy receivers in this one. Amari Cooper against the Giants, I think, is a good one, even though I liked Amari Cooper a lot last week. He's got 17 targets in 2 games, which isn't great, but the targets are there. It's just the targets aren't good targets, in my opinion. So 6,100 goes down in price against a very bad Giants secondary. Calvin Ridley, 6K against Green Bay. Green Bay kind of shut down Indy. But Calvin Ridley last week, 4 for 77 and 2 touchdowns of rushing and receiving. Jaden Reed against Tennessee, 5,900. You kind of saw, right? Week 1, Jordan Love looked really good. Without Jordan Love, not as good. Jameson Williams goes up in price again. Last week, 11 targets. He's got 20 targets in 2 games, so 10 targets a game. But 5 for 79. Gets a rushing attempt, gets 1.5 out of that one. So 2 games, 20 DK point average is really nice for him in that one. Keep going down at some of these guys. I mean, Shaheed, 5,300 against Philly is worth mentioning. 2 weeks, 16 in week 1, 20 week 2 at his price point. Hit in both, right? 4x week 1, week 2. Almost 5x. So Shaheed's definitely worth mentioning. Tank Dell, 5,200, very cheap in that matchup. Jerry Jeudy had a really good week last week. Through 2 weeks, 12 points at 11 points really doesn't do it for you, but it's consistent. The upside maybe just not be there until Deshaun Watson decides he wants to be that superstar quarterback. We once saw Jordan Addison. I mentioned worth watching the injury status there at 5,100. Jacoby Myers definitely worth mentioning against Carolina. Anybody playing Carolina should be worth mentioning. Demarcus Robinson, 5K against San Fran. Like, the Rams are going to throw the ball to somebody. Robinson is probably the guy I rely upon. Tutu Atwell as well in that one. Finally, like, Carolina receivers, I think, Deontay Johnson, 49, Adam Thielen, 5K, Andy Dalton. I don't know how I missed this. As soon as I saw Carolina, it reminded me. Andy Dalton, 4,800 against Vegas. It's Carolina, I get it, but it's worth mentioning. It's worth mentioning. He's the cheapest we've seen a starting quarterback be so far. So, I don't know why I totally forgot about that. But yeah, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, I definitely think are tournament plays this week. Going down this list, maybe Greg Dortch, 4,500. Josh Reynolds been used for Denver. Naylor, if both receivers are out, Jalen Naylor is worth mentioning there. Tutu Atwell, I mentioned earlier, he's at 4,300. Roma Dunze, 4,200. So close to that touchdown. Definitely would have paid off if you played him in the showdown. Michael Wilson, 4,100 in that matchup. Mitchell, I mentioned, 4K. I think the deep ball threat is definitely there for Mitchell. Other than that, like, I'm not. Brandon Powell, maybe 3,400. But to go down here, we're not really seeing anybody. So we'll go to tight end. McBride, 6,200 against Detroit. Cade Otton didn't do anything against Detroit. Cade Otton not really used. Parkinson, a good week against Detroit. McBride, 6 for 67. I don't know what I'm missing. Oh, the fumble touchdown. Oh my God, I forgot about that. So I was trying to figure out where the 18 came from for McBride. And I remember he got that fumble touchdown in the end zone. So he's 6,200 in that matchup. Laporta, 6K in that matchup. It is right. Bills tight ends didn't do much against Arizona. Parkinson didn't do much against Arizona. Do you want to take a shot on Laporta, who is cheap for what he did last season, but he's got 8 targets in 2 games. They got to get Laporta involved in their offense. He was too good last season for him to not be included. George Kittle, yeah, against the Rams. We just saw McBride, even though he got that fumble touchdown. George Kittle, 5,700 with no Debo. Yeah, it's got to be worth mentioning. Brock Bowers, another name worth mentioning. 17 targets in 2 games for Brock Bowers. The tight end, how is he going to get on the field? Almost gets a 100-yard bonus. Really good week out of him. Njoku, you're watching the injury status there. Mark Andrews kind of not wanting to take that against Dallas. Same for Isaiah Likely. Dallas Goedert against New Orleans, not really looking at that. You're watching the injury news for Jake Ferguson. Could be good against Baltimore with what Brock Bowers was able to do in that one. I guess if you combined Noah Gray and Travis Kelce. Dalton Schultz against Minnesota, 4,300. I like that one. Firemouth against the Chargers. I don't know if I'm really there yet. Keep going down. There's not a lot of names. Maybe Juanu Smith. I like Juanu Smith in that showdown. 6 for 53, 11 fantasy points for the paydown, 3,400. Shoemaker becomes the starting tight end again at 3,300 if Ferguson is out. Maybe Aikens 3K against the Giants. I mean, I'm not liking tight end this week. That's kind of where I'm getting at. I'm not liking tight end. I'm thinking maybe we pay up at tight end this week. And you can, depending on what the running back situation looks like. Defenses, we just go down to the defenses. Rams against San Fran, maybe. Cardinals through 2 weeks, Cardinals 2,400 and 2,300. They paid off both weeks. If you played them, you saved a bunch of money and you got an amazing payoff from them. Panthers against Vegas, not really interested there. Vikings against Houston, you gotta at least consider it. Week 1, they get you 22 points against Giants. Last week against the 49ers, 13 points. So they gotta be worth mentioning. They have to be. Miami against Seattle, this one I'm kind of intrigued at. Looking at it on paper, granted week 1, only 6. Last week against Buffalo, 0. Facing Seattle, it could be worth it. Saints against Philly at 2,600. Their defense has definitely paid off, averaging 2 picks a game there, so they're worth mentioning. Bears against Indy, 6 against Houston still, right? Averaging 15 points. Pay-ups, you're looking at Browns against the Giants, kind of looking at, Seattle against Miami possibly. Tampa against Denver. If both receivers are out. Texans against Minnesota. So I think there's some good defensive options this week. So hope you guys did enjoy the video. Like I said, if you guys want to join us or are interested in joining us to get my player pool, my bets, ask any fantasy or DFS questions, anything like that, get access to my spreadsheet throughout the week. If you guys are interested in that, the link for Discord is in the description down below. And I will see you guys in the next one.